I have I had that's 3 or 4 boxes of them, and then realized that no one wanted them. So firewood, I don't know. No, they don't burn that well.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to a live edition of Locked On Kraken. If you joined for the opening, a little clunky, so I apologize for that. But that was Dan Bylsma talking about his bobblehead. And thankfully, thanks to one of one of my fans from California, my Dan Bylsma bobblehead did not make it to the bonfire. But on today's episode of Locked On Kraken, I'll tell you a little bit behind that story there. A very interesting story here with the Seattle. And I can't get my stage to cooperate today. An interesting story about his bobbleheads. There we go. But also, it's a game day, Seattle hockey fans. So we are going to talk about Jani Nyman, who is set to make his debut. In addition to talking about bobbleheads, which it's a Joey Decord bobblehead day, very cute video with him being very impressed with the jawline of his bobblehead. We are going to talk some hockey. We'll get you ready for tonight's game. The Seattle Kraken hosting the Montreal Canadiens. We heard a little bit about what Dan Bylsma is expecting from this game, given that Montreal did play last night. The Montreal Canadiens on their West Coast swing were able to defeat the Vancouver Canucks 4-2. So they're coming in on a back-to-back. The Montreal Canadiens scored 2 of their goals in the first frame and then 1 in the second, 1 in the third. They were able to actually Vancouver outshot Montreal, but again, the Canucks they fell to the Montreal Canadiens. Montreal didn't get anything done on the power play. We'll do some of the breakdown between Montreal and the Seattle team. A Seattle team that's, not looking like they're going to make the playoffs. I think that's an understatement at this point in time. But, we know that, talked about this on the last handful of episodes, that Dan Bylsma still expects this team to show up and to show what their best version of hockey is, and believes and is setting the expectation that this team will show that. Let's hear a little bit more from Dan Bylsma. We have a few different clips. We're going to first hear what he had to say about Montreal since they did play last night. And then we will also hear what he had to say to Jani Nyman. I broke down some of his stats on yesterday's episode. I'll do it again for you today. But first, here's Dan Bylsma talking about the opponent for tonight, the Montreal Canadiens.
Last night, off the rush. They're dangerous in kind of a unique way in the offensive zone. They spread it out, and Caulfield, Suzuki can get lost on the weak side. Similar to a Kucherov type offensive zone where they can spread it out and kind of disappear and end up on the weak side of the ice for seam passes and one-timers. What does that mean? You gotta mark, A, not let them play there, and B, you gotta mark them. You gotta be aware of them. It means there's going to be 3 and 4 high in the offensive zone for them, and sort out with our forward and our defensemen to make sure we're aware where they're at, make sure they're aware and that we're there on the backside and taking that away.
So that was Dan Bylsma talking at Morning Skate today about the Montreal Canadiens. You heard some of the players that he's expecting will get activated. We did see that last night, Nick Suzuki, Juraj Slafkovsky, interesting, as well as Cole Caulfield and Mike Matheson scored for the Canadiens last night. And, really put out a challenge to his team on how to defend them, specifically on the rush. We also heard Dan Bylsma. He was asked and talked about the Beniers line and how they are competing against top lines of their opponents. And part of the strategy there is to have that solid line of Beniers with Capo Caco as well as Jaden Schwartz be able to tire down the top line of the opposing team. That's worked for the Seattle Kraken more often than not defensively. However, there's an argument to be made on if and how that is impacting what that line can also do offensively. I think it's been solid, but we heard from Jessica Campbell on this very program, the year of Beniers 2025. So if the Seattle Kraken are going to be playing their best hockey moving forward, then I expect Beniers and company to be a part of that. But someone who will enter the lineup today, we'll have to see where he slots in officially. We are expecting Jani Nyman to make his NHL debut. Talked about it on yesterday's episode. His family is coming in from Finland. They should be here for the game tonight, and there's a handful of other games. So a good stretch for Jani Nyman to make his NHL debut with the Seattle Kraken. Here's what Dan Bylsma told Jani and what he tells anyone getting a big chance on the big stage.
The message, to any young player getting their first game or getting an opportunity is you shouldn't leave the game wondering what their game is. Be in awe. You can be nervous. You can have jitters about the game, but don't let that not get to who you are and what you are as a player. So don't worry about mistakes. Don't worry about just go out and play your game. And if we see that tonight, you'll see you'll undoubtedly see a great shot. You watched practice yesterday. I was on him a little bit because he didn't shoot it on power play practice. I think in the game when it comes to him, he'll be ready to shoot it. But there was one instance on a rush play yesterday where he got a one-timer and it clanked off the crossbar, and we should all be seeing that tonight if he's playing his game.
So, the big man, he said, I'm a big man. That's what he told us during media availability yesterday. We're expecting the big man to get up some big shots. And you heard that Dan Bylsma is criticizing, or I should say critiquing, Jani Nyman. And we've also heard Jared McCann say the same thing. Shane Wright say the same thing. Matty Beniers say the same thing. He's really tasking his players to take the shot when the shot is available, which is huge for the Seattle Kraken. Another player who actually enters tonight's game on a little bit of a streak, but we heard that Dan Bylsma is also telling one Adam Larsson to do the same thing. He's riding a 4-game point streak dating back to March 4th against Minnesota. 4 points in that span since March 4th, 2 goals, 2 assists. And what we heard from Dan Bylsma is that why Adam Larsson is being so successful is because he's utilizing his defense to create offense, not just for the team, but for himself. And the charge for Larsson has been, hey, usually you're with Vince Dunn. We know Vince Dunn likes to be more of the offensive defender. That doesn't mean that if Adam Larsson, you have a shot that you don't take it. So he talked about, hey, if the puck is coming south to north and it's on your stick, shoot that thing. He talked about if the puck is moving from east to west, find a seam and drive to the net. Make yourself an option, make yourself available. And so these are some of the things that we're hearing Dan Bylsma charge not just Jani Nyman with, but all of the Seattle Kraken. And they sound like simple things, but when a team is not performing the way they think they should, or not getting the results that they feel that they deserve, we heard Eberle kind of talk about that after the Washington game. You maybe want to play it a little safe, but that's the opposite of what the Seattle Kraken team needs to do. And I'm grateful that we're hearing Dan Bylsma give his team the green light, so to speak. He's trying to instill the confidence in this team to shoot the puck. Coming up next, though, I want to talk about Jordan Eberle a little bit. I've talked about his transition back to the ice, back to health, let alone back to the ice. Just getting off of the crutches has been one that's been pretty impressive. We haven't heard too many details except for Dan Bylsma to say, again, that this is an injury that's really unprecedented. So the recovery, there was no clear path to what the recovery would look like. Eberle's been taking it on as a champ. And we're expecting in this game that he'll level up his road back to that edgy Eberle that we saw early in the season. We'll talk about that and more on today's live pregame game day episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. So visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action. Of course, you can still look at the NHL action, NBA, and so many other things. Also PWHL for those who watch women's hockey. You can do that over at FanDuel.com. And again, you can get in on that action all tournament long. Hey, thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala coming to you on YouTube Live. It's a game day. The Seattle Kraken will be taking on the Montreal Canadiens. Here's a little look at the head-to-head. I'm going to put it on the full screen for those watching on YouTube. 66 points in the standings for Montreal, 30, 27, and 6. Their away record, 14, 15, and 2. Your Seattle Kraken are 27, 34, and 4. Home record, 14, 15, and 4. So there you go. Last 10 games, 5, 4, and 1 for the Canadiens, including last night's win over the Canucks. 4, 6, and 0 for your Seattle Kraken. Jared McCann continues to lead the charge for the Kraken. Nick Suzuki for Montreal. Power play advantage to Montreal, 21.5% clip to an 18% power play for the Seattle Kraken. Penalty kill, 82.2% for Montreal, 77.1% for your Seattle Kraken. Mentioned it at the top of the show, but this is a Seattle Kraken team that knows that this Montreal team can get going on the rush. I talked about for the last few episodes, I liked the rush chances. I liked that the Seattle Kraken were attacking with multiple players, again, on the rush, and not just those one-offs. And so having a team, absolutely, Striata, good to see you, having a team that is going to challenge them on the rush, challenge them defensively, to the point I made in the first segment. I hope that doesn't cajole the minds of the Kraken to be defense first and only. I know it's weird hearing me say that because I love my defense and I'm not always thrilled with how Seattle plays defense, but we really have to see this Seattle Kraken team attack early and often. And, they say offense can be your best form of defense. I can't believe I'm leaning into that. But again, it's the mentality. We know the Seattle Kraken team's not going to the playoffs. This is an opportunity for them to really hone in on things that they need to be able to take with them to put in their bag moving forward. And one of the things that we may see moving forward is Jordan Eberle moving up in the lineup. And we are expecting to see him on the Stephenson line. Here is what Dan Bylsma said earlier today with regard to Eberle in that position, but also why Stephenson and Eberle might be a really good match for what the Seattle Kraken want to accomplish in the next handful of games. I think we're at Today's game 66. So, the Kraken have a few more games here to play with and to, I don't want to say experiment, but more so to refine the game, especially for players that we know are going to be around.
When we see Chandler's speed in the game, it's oftentimes because of the winger's wall play, the winger getting him the puck in the middle of the ice, and that's what Ebbs is a seasoned pro at. So, like Ebbs is still, I think, he's still in the process of getting all of it back in terms of quickness and his first step, but you're seeing it more and more. I'll just say he's still, I think he's still working to get back there, and you just seeing it more and more. I think you can look at games as a progression. They're from the Nashville to the Philly game to the Washington game. Washington game being a back-to-back, what would might be a tougher game to get his feet moving and play. That is probably his best game of those three in doing it.
I mean, there you go. So Stephenson is best when his wingers are activating. Again, moving the play into the offensive zone, good wall play, and that's what Eberle is good at. So Eberle feeling better, him being more confident, him being able to bring his best game and combine that with a Chandler Stephenson. That's what we're hoping to see tonight. I love this. Defense is for nerds. Erica L. Ayala, March 12, 2025. Yes, book it. Defense is not for nerds. Defense is for people who have a healthy respect for the game. That's the quote. You can book that. I will always say that. Defense is critically important. For the Seattle Kraken, defense will remain important. But what's also important is that they start getting their finishing touch. That's what's been missing from this team with any consistency. And I like how Dan Bylsma broke that down when it comes to Jordan Eberle and complementing Chandler Stephenson and vice versa. Curious to see what that line can create for this Seattle Kraken team who, again, they want to be playing their best hockey. Not much, quote unquote, to play for, but there's still plenty of opportunity here. Apparently I've been pronouncing Jani's last name incorrect. Nyman is how he pronounces it. According to Jeff Baker, I'm looking at his 3 keys to the game, or 3 game essentials, excuse me. One of the ones I want to talk about here is keeping them hungry. And he's basically talking about some of the players who we've talked about this week. Ty Cartier, Mikey Eberle, John Hayden, giving them extended looks, but also this is a chance for them to, again, show what they have and make difficult decisions for the coaching staff and the front office. That's what we heard from Ron Francis, right? That's what he wants to see. There's definitely some spark and spunk that we lost, some sandpaper. The pepper pot himself, we lost at the trade deadline. Yanni Gourde, Brandon Tanev, Turbo, and the Maestro. I mean, I think it was Triadic, right, that said the nicknames alone, we definitely lost some of the best nicknames ever, perhaps, for the Seattle Kraken in the trade. But we lost a lot of fight, a lot of grit. And so Eberle, we heard from him yesterday. John Hayden, not a man of many words, but we know he definitely can be a spark. And Ty Cartier is expected to really push this team forward with the physicality. I want to see this team really muck it up. We know that we need this team to play more aggressive. I love this. Triadic saying, what I want to see tonight is a really good game from Capo Caco getting to the net. Mwah! Capo Caco getting to the net. Jaden Schwartz getting to the net, Shane Wright getting to the net, playing in that space. I love that. Striatic really, all right, we got it. Your player of the game today is definitely Capo Caco. I like this pick. And I talked about the Beniers line a little bit earlier and what they're doing defensively for this team. We heard what Dan Bylsma had to say about that, but the offense, again, has to come as well. It's about establishing who Capo Caco is as a Kraken over a long sample size and what sort of contract we want to offer this summer. Huge. And that's what Jeff Baker was alluding to. He was talking about some prospects, but I love that you mentioned this, Striatic, because it's the same for a player like Capo Caco. And maybe the same, I think Ellie Tolvanen has a little bit more time, quote unquote, per se, but with more opportunity when you have players like Gord, Tanev, and Bjorkstrand gone. Let's see Ellie Tolvanen step up. Let's see Shane Wright, Matty Beniers, Capo Caco step up. And then you get that young crop that fills in that fourth line. We got to see it all. We have to see something, right, from this Kraken team. I do think Joey's a little bit on the tired side, but it is his bobblehead night. So bobblehead nights, I think Paul's still got his tally going. Grubauer didn't play on his bobblehead night, which was unfortunate the day he gets back. Joey Decord will play on his. And if you missed it, I played a clip. I'm going to play the full clip in a minute here. Dan Bylsma talking about this guy right here, his bobblehead. And you might be a little surprised to know what he did with his bobbleheads. We're going to talk about that as we close out this show. But, the Seattle Kraken, I don't want to say they don't have anything to play for because that's not true. They're playing to help people like me understand what the real goal of this team is. I have questioned, is this a rebuild? Is it a hybrid rebuild? Is it a retool? All of those are different terms used in sports, and at certain points in the timeline, they overlap, right? So some people saying it's a retool. Some people saying it's a full rebuild. Some people vehemently disagree that it's a rebuild. I tossed in maybe hybrid rebuild, but I enjoyed this comment from Rogue Wave Creative. And the thing I hate about it the most is that I didn't think about it. So retool is what Rogue Wave Creative, it's actually Ricky AZ8640 whose comment I really like, but this one's good too. Rogue Wave Creative says retool, no way ownership will completely rebuild. You could argue they might and spin it, but with prices and with many season ticket renewals, they cannot afford to, at least in their eyes. This is an old discussion, but take year 2, and whether you like Ron Francis or not, that was his goal, to slowly build. The year 2 success gave a false positive, and here we are. Now, you have heard me say something to that effect since season 2. I said we arrived too early. How, if at all, does the timeline change? Is everyone in on it all together? Oh, I think that's still debatable. Feels like he was trying to save his job this past offseason with the signings. If he stays, they will have about, it talks about the cap. No reason not to sign an impact player. So hopefully they can do that. And the comment goes on, but I agree with that. Season 2, I think, threw a wrench into the timeline. I don't know that it necessarily should have, given what was on that roster and how Philip Grubauer played. This is the comment, though, that I was thinking of. Ricky AZ8640, where was the original build? So again, this is like, how can you have a rebuild if there wasn't a build to begin with? An expansion team doesn't stop building until its initial draft classes start filtering through the roster. This is only starting to happen now. Year 2 was a fluke until fans start accepting that they're going to be in a world of hurt. I think that's interesting. I think that's an interesting perspective because you could argue that the build is still happening. The foundation, in theory, has been laid, but we're not building up to the second, third floor yet. And I think that's fair. And I will say I've even lost some of that perspective. That being said, I still think there are moves that were made or not made that are worth scrutiny and that point to perhaps this franchise not completely aligning itself with if this is a build, a rebuild, a retool, or anything in between. And season 2 seems to be what threw the wrench into the timeline. So, yeah, I think that's interesting. Striatic saying, always love a Montreal versus Seattle matchup. Our oldest rivals going back to 1917. Yes, indeed. That's always a good point. I'm also, of course, looking at Uri versus Shane Wright. I don't know how much juice is left, how much tread is left on those tires, but it's just something fun to talk about. Coming up, though, as promised, just a little fun, something to get you ready for tonight's game where you will get a bobblehead. It will not look like this because it will be Joy Decord and not Disco Dan in a ugly holiday jacket blazer. You'll get a Joy Decord bobblehead tonight, but I just couldn't help it. Dan Bylsma talking about what he did with all his bobbleheads. That's coming up, and then just some closing thoughts as I get you ready for game day at Climate Pledge Arena. Today's episode of Locked on Kraken also brought to you by our friends at Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions do apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. All right, Seattle hockey fans, it's a game day. Wanted to come to you live. And okay, the bobblehead story. It is Joy Decord bobblehead night. Joy Decord approves of his bobblehead. And I don't remember, it might have been Piper. Someone asked Dan Bylsma today where bobbleheads stack up when it comes to accomplishments. Where does it stack up when it comes to trading cards, which I have? I don't have them here, but to the side in the headquarters, I have those little buttons. He didn't mention anything about buttons, but I would have asked him about buttons. I love buttons. I love, we've got, let me see if, is it still in here? I don't think it is. I have a Jessica Campbell sticker, decals. Where does the paraphernalia, how do you rank some of the things? Here's what Dan Bylsma had to say about, these kinds of milestones for professional hockey players.
There's moments for every person and every player in the game, and one of those moments, your first game, is a big moment. Getting your first player's card, kind of a behind-the-scenes special moment. I don't think bobblehead gets to that quite of a special moment. It's kind of fun to I definitely didn't get one as a player, so I had that's 3 or 4 boxes of them, and then realized that no one wanted them, so firewood, I don't know. No, they don't burn that well.
Jeez Louise, can you imagine what that Bylsma bobblehead bonfire looked like? Just barbecuing up bobbleheads. I don't know, Dan. That might be the coldest thing I've ever heard you say. But thank you to the fan that sent these to me. I have one of these. Apparently Dan Bylsma is only down to a handful himself. He went from 3 boxes to just 3 or 4 as the barbecue got going. So I'm glad I have one of these. I haven't even opened this box yet. I don't think I'm going to do that today. We're not going to do an unboxing or anything today. Nothing crazy. But I hope you enjoy bobblehead night. I'm so gutted I never made it to the Maestro bobblehead day. I was supposed to go to Seattle and then some other work related things came up. You got to stick to your plans, man. Dang it. I really wanted that Maestro bobblehead. And either way, you know who has a pretty nice bobblehead collection? Zame Begg of Davy Jones Locker Room and also helps out here at Locked On Kraken. And he will have a recap of Montreal's game. Gonna let him take the lead, see what he's got, just like we're letting Jani Nyman hit the ice tonight, making his debut with his family at Climate Pledge Arena. It's going to be an exciting time. If you're going to the game, have so much fun. Tell the crew I say, hey, should be in Seattle. We'll see. Should be in Seattle next month, but I'll keep you posted here. Zame's going to have you covered for tomorrow's episode. And there's only a few things left to say. And that is a reminder to be kind to yourself and grant yourself grace so you can be kind to other people. We hold fast. We stay true, and loud and proud we say, as always, especially on a game day, let's go Kraken. I'll catch you on the Friday episode of Locked On Kraken. Peace out, everybody.